Well, hello, my kindred spirits. It is so good to see you again today. How have you been? I always love interacting with y'all in the comments section. That's my favorite part of making these videos because you tell me little snippets of your life and we go back and forth and I learn things about you, where you live, your family, and that means a lot to me that you would share that with me. So I just wanted to say thank you for that and thank you for coming around here and spending your time with me. And as I was thinking about making this video for you, I wanted to make sure that I did a few things. One, that it was soothing for you, because after all, this is an ASMR style video or channel, and that's my main goal, is to soothe you and have a place for you to come and just rest and feel calm and comforted. But the mother and teacher in me also wants to make sure you always learn something. Learning is so valuable and fun. And if someone had said that to me, I want to make sure you learn something. If someone had said that to me when I was in my early 20s, I would have bucked at it. I would have said, oh, no, I don't want anything to do with that, because I did not value learning when I was younger, when I was in school. I thought it was a dreadful thing. But after I got older and I had children of my own and then started homeschooling them, I can't get enough. The world is so wonderful and beautiful and vast, and there is not one lifetime isn't enough to learn all of the great things that there is to learn. So I do appreciate you coming here, and again, I hope that you walk away having learned a little something or taken a snippet away from this and maybe have a little spark in your head. The reason for this video today is I want to tell you about the very first book that I wrote, and it's the 10th anniversary for that very first book. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I did it and why, and I want to encourage you to possibly someday, if it's something that you have thought about doing, I want to encourage you to do it as well. You're going to hear all sorts of sounds during this video. The cicadas are singing like crazy. You're probably going to hear some cows in the background and chickens clucking. I could have shut all my windows and maybe drowned out that. But you know what? That's a beautiful sound to me. It's peaceful. It's lovely. So many of you have said the same thing. So we're going to keep it, because after all, this is my home, and these are the sounds that I hear all the time, and they're soothing to me, and I hope that they'll be soothing to you. Let's start. I've made some notes here, and I have my books here, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about the very first book that I ever wrote 10 years ago. Now, we'll begin with the catalyst for this. I was in Benson's, Indiana, with my husband and 3 children. And my husband was actually working in Mount Vernon, Illinois. But there were no hotels that were large enough to accommodate all 5 of us for a week in Mount Vernon at the time. So we had to go across the border to Indiana and stay at a hotel there that was large enough. While we were there, I found a local publication that was printed weekly, and they had articles in it. It was just a newspaper, and they had articles in it about different happenings in the town, advertisements, and then a few editorials. And one lady had written a column and I suppose she probably wrote it every week, and it was a sweet story that she had written about her boys, kind of a slice of life story about a snow day. And as I was reading it, I loved the story, first of all, but second of all, I thought to myself, I could do this. And as a matter of fact, I had before, when I numerous times I have written stories, funny stories, interesting stories about my children and, just life, raising a family and living with animals and different things that we've done over the years. And people resonated with those stories when I shared them on social media. And often they would say, "You should write a book." Well, after reading her story and then going to her website, I found that she had written a book. She had self published a book. And she was also a professor at the university there in town. So I took that information back home to North Carolina with me, and I studied on it a little bit. And by the time the nearly the end of April, it was April of the year, I decided, by golly, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. I bought a book on how to write a book, and it was by a lady named Anne McIndoe. And she, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, may have worked for Tony Robbins at one time, but I may be remembering that wrong. All that to say, she was instrumental in me completing that book in such a short amount of time. So I got Anne McIndoe's book. It was Easy Steps to Write Your Book. And I followed through every step that she suggested. And I had a lot of different ideas in my head of what I was going to write about. But I finally decided on writing stories and sharing stories of people because I do love people. And I've met some very interesting people over the years. And where I've met them was at the farmer's market. I've told you before that for many years, since 2001, I have sold things at a farmer's market, but I just became enthralled with a farmer's market back in the 90s when they first had one in Knoxville, Tennessee. That's when I got really engaged with that. So I've always just been fascinated with the people who are farmers, who are artisans, who are not just in the artistic sense of making art on the wall like this, but making craftsmen, maybe I should say craftsmen too, crafting different edibles in the way of ice cream and cakes and candies and things like that. And because their stories are each unique, first of all. And second of all, a lot of these people have such a rich story to tell. A lot of the folks that I have talked to over the years started out in a white collar, fancy job and decided that was not for them, and they sold everything and bought land and moved to the country and bought cows or started raising a crop and then made a business out of that. That is something that's always interesting to me, and I thought it would be interesting to other people too, and I wanted to share those stories. So what I did was I made a different columns of things that I needed to do to get this book finished. So I started in May of 2015, and I had a firm deadline, and I mean it was firm, a firm deadline to have this book finished by October 2015. And the reason why is because I did a craft fair every year at our little school and in the town, and it was a busy craft fair, and people from all over came around. But I thought that that would be the perfect place to sell my book because I knew a lot of people who would be featured in the book lived in the area as well. So I had that firm deadline, and boy, I got started. And I pushed through every day. I would do something for my book, whether it be going out and conducting an interview or rewriting my notes that I'd taken to clean it up, and then taking photographs, editing those photographs. And I'm happy to say that I actually finished ahead of the game. I finished in August, late August of 2015, and then I sent the book to the publishing company, which was a self-publishing company. I knew that I didn't want to try to send it into a publisher. I went that route slightly, trying to get into a local publisher, but I am a big do-it-yourselfer, and my motivation was never to make a ton of money or to become famous. It was more of a just to see if I could do it. And secondly, I just wanted to do it my way. And with a traditional publisher, you have to do things their way. And I'm going to do it my way. So after I got everything written and all of my photographs taken, I did have to hire an editor and a formatter. I tend to write the way I talk, and that does not translate well into a book. So I had an amazing editor who cleaned up my language for me. I didn't cuss, but just cleaned it up for me so that it would flow better. And then I had someone to format the photos for me, because when you upload things to your books to a publishing company, you have to have them formatted in a certain way. And so there is an expense with that. It wasn't a lot, but there is an expense associated with that. And then I had them publish it, and this was my very first copy. And I had Blurb print this for me. And I don't even know if they're still in business, but I wrote, it's called From Farm to Market by Lindy Mayberry Sellers, and it says Stories of Farmers and Artisans in the Carolina Piedmont. And on the back it says, everyone has a story, and if you sit with another soul and listen long enough, they are usually happy to oblige you with the telling of theirs. And that is so true. I've told you this before. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and that is so that we can speak less and listen more to what the other person has to say. And so I really enjoy hearing what other people have to say. And what I did was, most of the people that I interviewed, I knew in some capacity, not everyone though. And I would ask people if they would be interested in being in the book that I was going to write in the area. And most people were happy to do it. There was only one person who ghosted me. He didn't say no, he just ghosted me. And I thought, well, okay, you're not the guy for this book. And there's a lot of good information in here, and a lot of interesting stories, a lot of pretty photographs. I was the photographer too, so I took all of the photographs, met some fascinating people. As a matter of fact, this lady, Mary Tarleton, I don't know if she still does this, but she grew wild ginger down at a farm. She was an organic ginger grower, and I went one time and helped her harvest it. It was fascinating because I didn't even know that ginger grew in this area. I thought it was a more tropical thing. And she showed me all of her notes, and she told me about the organic specifications, which are very strict. And then I had them all share a recipe with me too. I love a recipe, and I think that that's interesting when people share something with me that they enjoy eating too. And it was a lot of fun. It really was just a lot of fun to do this. And if you're ever interested, I would love to read some of these stories to y'all. So let me know if you're interested in hearing about that. Now, what I did after that, I kind of rode on the coattails of that first book for 2 years. And it opened up doors for me that I didn't even imagine it would. I just thought, okay, I'm going to write a book and I'm going to sell it at the craft show, and I'm going to sell it at the farmer's market, because I also worked at the farmer's market, and that would be that. But it opened up so many different doors for me. The first thing it did was I started a podcast, and I would also conduct interviews. It's no longer available now, but that was the first thing I did that had sort of an on-air presence. It was just my voice, not video like this. So that got me started down that road. Then I started teaching classes, in-person classes, about homesteading and homemaking subjects, and I would teach things about herbal medicine making because, as many of you know, I am an herbalist, and those things just kind of stepped on the other and opened up little doors that I didn't even imagine existed. So the second book that I wrote is just more of a little guide, but it's called The Bohemian Lady's Journal of Wild Edibles, written and illustrated by Lindy Mayberry Sellers. And again, it's just a guide, but it was fun to put it together because I created the artwork. And this is a guide to use some of the things that are found in this region of the United States in the Carolina Piedmont. So I talk about elderberries, and I drew an illustration of elderberries, hickory nuts, and I gave either a recipe or a medicinal or edible usage for them. Dandelion, persimmon, which persimmon trees are all over our property, blackberries, and there's another illustration, and then acorns, because you can grind acorns up and make a flour, and then henbit, which grows like crazy, and then plantain. Plantain is such a medicinal plant, very useful medicinal plant. So again, this is just a little guide, and this was fun to put together. And then, so I continued teaching those classes, and then an opportunity came to start writing an article in our local newspaper. And so it came full circle because, as you remember, I told you about reading that article a few years previously from that lady, and that was the catalyst in starting my own book writing. And so I started writing those articles every week, and they were a slice of life article. And I would talk about different treasures that the kids and I found on our land and then out, traveling around. I talked about growing different things. I talked about attitudes and habits and warm spring days, and March being a month of gentle renewal, and raising sheep and children. There's just, again, slice of life stories. I would talk about that in my newspaper articles. Now, someone mentioned to me the other day when I posted a picture of myself looking really scary. In the community page, you'll have to go back and look at it. I put a picture up of myself wearing a robe and curlers in my hair and a can of beer in my hand and a fake cigarette and a blacked out tooth. And someone said, I want to know the origin of this photo. Well, the origin of that photo was I wrote an article called The Mean Woman, and I needed a picture to accompany it. And so I went outside and I posed for that picture, and that's the reason why I have that picture in the first place. I was able to compile those articles that I wrote for the newspaper and put them into my third book here, and it's called Seasons at Sweet Harvest Homestead. And I took that picture there. Those are some flowers that I grew, and you can see my spinning wheel in the back there. And then I've got a little author's picture here. I had short hair back then, and this was a lot of fun to write. And I dedicated it to my grandmother because she had just passed away earlier the year prior to that. And so I'm grateful for the opportunity to compile all of those magazine newspaper articles into this book. And it's nice to have it for, my children and grandchildren later on. And then the very last book that I wrote, and again, this was just a funny little book, was Fancy the Country Bichon. And many of y'all probably remember my precious little Bichon Frigé Fancy, who passed away last August, as a matter of fact. And I put together funny pictures of her doing farm chores because she was no ordinary Bichon. And Bijans are supposed to be foo-foo dogs, and she was not. And so I took a picture of her inside of a tractor, and I took a picture of her fishing next to a pond and breaking beans. And it was just a silly, fun book, but it was a lot of fun to put together. Again, writing just that first book did so many things because, first of all, it made me brave, and it made me realize that I could do more things, and realize that I'm capable of more things than what I ever thought possible. I even started a little school. It was a preschool program in 2019 called Pumpkin Creek Academy. And because there were parents who would say, "Oh my goodness, I wish that I could come sit at your house and learn some of those things that you talk about in the newspaper." Or I wish that my kids could come learn that. So I started a little preschool program called Pumpkin Creek Academy. Our land borders Pumpkin Creek, and I just love pumpkins and thought that would be a fitting name. And it was kind of a trial and error, and it was only supposed to last a semester from September to December. But we had so much fun that I asked the parents if they would like to continue on January through May of the following year, and they said yes. So those little children would come over, and they'd come in the morning at 9 in the morning, and we would learn some sort of homesteading or homemaking kind of a skill. I had to cater it to preschoolers, first of all. So you're only going to have their attention for a short amount of time. But they would make jam, and they would learn about sheep, and we would go feed the sheep and water them. So they got to learn how to kind of take care of animals. And we learned about spinning wool and even shearing the sheep. The boys came up. The boys came over. They were all boys the first semester, and they would learn about shearing sheep. And we just had so much fun together. And we would walk along the banks of Pumpkin Creek, and it was great. And then I wound up doing classes in the summertime at like a camp, and I would teach the children how to make soap, jam, bread, candles, and then I would also teach them on Friday how to market those things, because I am an entrepreneur at heart, and I love when a kid has that spirit too, and especially when they go on to sell those things. And so I would teach them how to make those different things throughout the week during the camp. And then on Friday, we would go into marketing, and I would talk about where and how you could sell those items, because it's fun to be able to sell the things that you create with your own hands. And they enjoyed that a lot too. So that was another thing that all stemmed from writing that book. This came in 2020. And in 2020, our town, which is up the street of Locust, North Carolina, celebrated their 150th birthday. And so I wanted to do something to commemorate that. And what I did was I went around town and talked to some people in the community who were influential people, the mayor, a doctor, some of the people who have worked in the community for years and years, a barber, people who were church leaders. And so I went around and I spoke to them and asked them if they would be willing to model for me in my calendar and kind of make it look like an old-timey photograph. And then I would sell the calendar and give the funds to our historical society. And they all said yes. It was so much fun. And what was so great is they were interested in it, and they wanted to help. So they would tell me, okay, I've got the best idea and the best costume, and here's what we'll do. So for instance, this is a local barber in town, and then these are a couple of friends of mine who own a print shop, and they went to the barber across the street and acted like it was 1950s and got a haircut. And so that was so much fun. And then the barber bought, and the trophy or the printing place bought an advertisement so that I could pay for the calendars. And then this couple had their old car in the picture, and they were on some property that their family owned. This is a man named Ernie, and he was wearing his daddy's old baseball uniform from Locust. This is the former mayor and his wife Tracy, and he was riding on a tractor that belonged to his granddaddy. These are the folks, get Gary and Kendra Tucker. They are the ones who are in charge of the Locust Historical Society, and they were standing in front of an old home in Locust that Kendra's grandparents built. And these are some of the children who were in my classes, and I took this picture out behind the old farmhouse. And then this is a local doctor in town, and this is another 1950s vehicle. This is a lady who, this is her church, and I thought that this was such a beautiful photograph of her in front of that church. This is a dear friend of mine who has worked in the community for years. Everyone knows her. Her name is Velvet. Isn't that a great name? And her mother named her for the movie National Velvet with Elizabeth Taylor, and she does love horses, just like Velvet did in the story. This is Heather, and she is a local yoga teacher. And then I don't know if you can recognize those three children in that place, but these are my children, and this was taken in front of the old farmhouse. And then the last one, oh, this one was so much fun. This is a lady who lives in the area, and everybody knows the family. And this was taken on the front porch of her old homestead, which is right down the road here. And this is her and her daughter-in-law, and then grandchildren too. And it was so special. I was so thrilled to be able to make that calendar. And again, the reason why I'm telling you all of this is because you don't know what kind of things can happen for you, what kind of opportunities that you can have by doing something like writing a book and what it can lead to, but not only for you, but for other people in the community. So for instance, the people that I wrote about in my first book, they got bragging rights, they got to be in a book, and they were it made me so happy to see how proud that they were. And they would buy several copies and then give it to their family members because they were proud to be featured in a book with their business. So that was endearing. And then the people who were in the calendar, how many people in their lifetime get to be a calendar girl? And that was fun. That was fun to be featured in a calendar like that. So you not only do things for yourself, but more importantly, you give other people a voice and a lift up, and just you don't know how that could be the catapult to push somebody else to do something in their own lives as well. So I want you to take that away from this, that yes, it was really cool that I did this, but I want you to take away from this thoughts that, you know what, I can do that too, because you have a story to tell. Everyone does. Everyone has something to tell, whether it be fiction or nonfiction, whether it be sharing recipes from your family or memoirs. You have a story to tell, and people need to hear it. Somebody needs to hear that story that you have to tell. And you don't even have to write a book. You could start a YouTube channel. You could start a blog. You could start a Substack. There are so many different things that you could do to get your voice out there. And I just want to encourage you with that. A lot of folks think, well, that genre is already overly saturated, whatever your genre may be. But it's not, because it doesn't have you talking about it. Your voice is very important, and nobody has done that genre in the way that you have done it. And that could help encourage others. And I want you to take that away from this whole entire video, that your voice needs to be heard. One other couple of quick things that I wanted to tell you that you should know before you jump into this is, keep this in mind: determination trumps talent. Somebody can be super talented at writing, or anything for that matter, but if they're not determined to get it out there to the masses, it's never going to happen. So if you are determined and you don't have as much talent as someone else, it doesn't matter, because you just doing the work is going to be better than not doing it at all and just sitting there. And you have information in your head that people need to hear. Don't keep it bottled up inside of you. Get it out. So be determined if you want to get your message out there in the form of a book, or again, podcast or YouTube channel. And keep this in mind too, that publishing doesn't require a big publisher anymore. You can self-publish on so many different platforms. Again, I published with Blurb and with KDP, and I know that, I don't even know if Blurb still exists. They probably do. I didn't look them up beforehand. I probably should have. There are so many ways to self-publish, and you don't have to have a big publisher anymore. And then the other thing I wanted to remind you is that when you do self-publish, if you are indeed thinking of having a national bestseller, you will have to market everything yourself. Publishers in traditional publishing will market things for you, but you're the one who has to do the legwork if you self-publish. So keep that in mind too. And there aren't a huge amount of costs with self-publishing. Just the editor, the formatter, and then if you have to hire somebody to take photographs, you may have to hire some of that. But again, if you're interested, I would encourage you to try it out and make a timeline. Get the lady Ann McIndoe's book, 7 Easy Steps to Write Your Book. I will have to look that up, and I'll pin it in the top comment so that you'll know. Because just going on somebody's coattails who's done it before and can tell you the formula is very helpful, especially if you've never done it before. So I hope, my friends, that was interesting to you and informative. I hope it was soothing. I hope that my voice helped to soothe you to sleep. But I hope, more importantly, that something sparked your interest, and that you may like to do something like this too someday. Someday soon, not someday later, though. I want to help you, and I want to encourage you to do it now. Listen, I adore y'all. I appreciate you so much coming back to see me week after week, and you just mean so much to me, and I appreciate you. Y'all take good care, my friends, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye-bye.